In this podcast episode, Scott Galloway shares his candid perspectives on the rapid evolution of artificial intelligence, its societal impacts, and the shifting global and economic landscape. He also explores the decline of America's international brand, the current geopolitical tensions in the Middle East, and the deep cultural and personal insights around masculinity and resilience. Scott offers a critical take on tech leadership, regulation, and how individuals can navigate the uncertainties of our time. Scott begins by observing two major brand declines over the past 18 months: the United States standing abroad and the artificial intelligence sector. America, once viewed as the world's arbiter and enforcer, now finds its image damaged, with more people abroad regarding China as a force for good than the U.S., a historical first. Scott views the Trump administration's legacy in this context as marred by criminal corruption and incompetence, particularly in its current handling of Middle Eastern conflicts, which appear strategically flawed and damaging to the U.S. brand. Parallel to the geopolitical erosion is AI's brand problem. Initially seen as a promising innovation that could create wealth and opportunity, AI has devolved in public perception to something frightening and elitist. This change is exacerbated by comments from prominent CEOs like Elon Musk and Sam Altman, who forecast large-scale job displacement and dystopian futures. Scott highlights the stark wealth divide in perceptions of AI. Affluent users view it positively, while working and middle-class individuals bear hidden costs such as energy price hikes and marginalization from investment gains. Scott pushes back against the widespread catastrophizing around AI's threat to jobs. He believes much of the alarmism is a fundraising tactic designed to elevate valuations by emphasizing existential threats rather than underlying data trends. He points out that despite the hype about mass layoffs, overall U.S. unemployment remains historically average. New business formations have doubled over the past decade, and key professions like radiology or coding are still growing. While AI may reduce certain entry-level or routine roles, on balance, it will likely create more jobs than it destroys over the medium to long term. He illustrates this with changes in his own businesses, where AI tools have dramatically increased the productivity of employees, allowing fewer to accomplish what once required many. However, he stresses that workers must evolve by gaining AI fluency, as the ability to wield these tools smartly will be a critical competitive advantage. The labor market is reshaping, not collapsing, with vocational work gaining prominence, even as traditional college grad unemployment edges upward. The convergence of AI with industrial robotics is where Scott sees the most tangible and immediate shareholder value. He contrasts fanciful visions of humanoid robots serving tea or performing surgery independently with the practical reality that robotics will augment human work rather than replace it wholesale. A neurosurgeon, for example, will be able to perform twice as many precise surgeries using robotic assistance. Companies like Amazon exemplify this trend on a massive scale, deploying industrial robots across fulfillment centers to double retail output without increasing headcount. Scott is skeptical of the consumer robot fantasy and warns of weaponized robotics as a worrying future development. He also critiques Elon Musk's optimistic projections around Tesla's robotics and autonomous vehicles, acknowledging Musk's visionary storytelling, but cautioning on the gap between hype and delivered performance, which is often intended to draw investment and maintain high valuations. Scott discusses how AI's development and deployment have benefited mainly the wealthy, who can leverage it for investment and business growth, widening existing inequalities. CEOs and founders often oscillate between doom-laden warnings and capital-raising optimism, yet their primary duty is to maximize shareholder value, regardless of societal damage. He mentions Sam Altman's brand collapse from AI advocate to a figure distrusted by the public, emblematic of a pattern where tech leaders shift towards self-preservation rather than altruistic leadership. Scott underscores that technology companies are not benevolent creators, but profit-driven entities, and much of the regulatory responsibility has been abdicated to underskilled governments. The absence of robust guardrails allows negative externalities like data misuse, youth radicalization, and mental health crises to proliferate unchecked. He also notes disturbing nihilistic trends in tech elites, many of whom prepare go bags and exile plans rather than addressing systemic problems in society. One of Scott's most poignant observations concerns the erosion of resilience among young people, especially young men, driven in part by frictionless online interactions and AI-enabled experiences. The ease of digital communication and synthetic substitutes for social and romantic connections is diminishing young people's capacity to handle rejection and develop grit, critical skills for personal success and mental health. He encourages deliberate exposure to social challenges and the cultivation of no as a positive marker of growth and endurance. Scott warns that AI's greatest threat is not job loss or economic disruption per se, but loneliness. With algorithms designed to nudge extremes and social media amplifying tribalism, AI's moderating effect by seeking medians and averages may be a hopeful counterbalance. Still, he stresses that pervasive loneliness, depression, and social isolation will be major societal costs amid prosperity, fueled by tech platforms that substitute real human connection. Turning to geopolitics, Scott critiques the Trump administration's approach to the Middle East as strategically incompetent despite operational strengths. Influenced by the success of the swift Venezuela special operations, Trump aimed for a defining legacy as liberator of the Middle East, but failed to comprehend enduring realities such as Iran's distributed power and the absence of unconditional surrender in modern conflict. The current war is described as a quagmire fueled by poor coordination with allies, inadequate diplomacy, and misreading the enemy's incentives. The war has damaged the U.S. brand, alienated allies, and complicated navigation freedoms critical to global trade. Scott projects an uncertain resolution, possibly involving multinational forces, but warns that continuing chaos and mixed messaging undermine effectiveness. His assessment is that corrupt incompetence within the administration is worsening the crisis and eroding domestic support, contributing to wider instability. Scott provides a skeptical view of tech CEOs as power players driven to maximize shareholder returns rather than societal good. This dynamic creates a continuous villain's journey where initial optimism about visionary leadership devolves into erosion of trust. The abdication of regulatory responsibility to under-resourced governments means abuses proliferate unchecked. Scott draws historical parallels to industries like tobacco and environmental pollution, arguing that without robust legislation, tech companies will always prioritize profits, even at the expense of public welfare. He stresses that we should not naively trust leaders like Sam Altman or Mark Zuckerberg, but instead demand and build competent regulatory frameworks that hold these companies accountable for systemic harms, including surveillance, misinformation, and societal coarsening. The podcast turns practical as Scott addresses the current inflated valuations in AI and tech stocks, predicting an inevitable market correction given the overinvestment in infrastructure and lofty expectations. He compares AI to transformational technologies like PCs, jet transportation, and vaccines, suggesting AI may ultimately become as significant, but without a handful of companies capturing enormous shareholder value due to the technology's converging and distributed nature. Scott advises individuals, especially younger listeners, to diversify investments broadly and to prioritize sustained contributions to low-cost index funds. He emphasizes investing in oneself through skills acquisition and relationships as the best hedge against economic volatility. For those in innovation-driven fields, the ability to integrate AI fluency and continuously upskill is critical. He acknowledges the psychological hardship of recessions, but argues that downturns historically present unique opportunities to build wealth and launch new ventures as assets become more affordable and fresh business models emerge. Toward the end, the conversation shifts to personal and cultural themes explored in Scott's book, Notes on Being a Man. He reflects on the modern masculinity crisis, advocating for kindness, emotional openness, and embracing vulnerability. Emphasizing resilience, Scott recounts his own professional failures and recoveries, underscoring that persistence after getting shot in the face is a critical success factor. Scott frames fatherhood and purpose as transformative, describing how becoming a parent deepened his sense of meaning beyond transactional relationships. He highlights the importance of storytelling and relationships as enduring human skills in an automated world, encouraging young men to handle rejection and develop grit through active social engagement. Forgiveness, humility, and embracing love and grief are seen as key emotional lessons to carry forward. Scott shares a deeply personal reflection on the loss of his mother and how grief has shaped him, emphasizing the paradox that grief is the price of love and that embracing vulnerability enriches life rather than diminishing it. He encourages others to cherish relationships and forgive both themselves and their loved ones, framing this emotional honesty as integral to mental strength and true happiness. In this way, the episode weaves broad socio-political insights with intimate personal wisdom, offering a nuanced understanding of living through turbulent technological, economic, and social change.